What's up, everyone? Bryce Koon. We're back here, Swarm Talk, previewing a big game, Ole Miss against Georgia Tech. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video. And listen, 67% of you watching this content are not even subscribed. It's completely free. You just need to hit that button down there, set up notifications so you know when we go live. Can't wait to see you. Can't wait to go join in some great conversation. We already got my man Justin in there. I'm going to bring my unhinged behavior tonight on tonight's show. Going to talk Georgia Tech, Ole Miss, my thoughts on this game, the national perception of this game, and there's been a lot of thoughts being thrown around. Ole Miss obviously has some injuries. We're going to talk about that as well. We're just going to talk about kind of the full scope. What can Georgia Tech accomplish as they head over to Oxford? Should be a fun one. Let us know in the comments if you're going to be heading over there as well. My name is Bryce Koon, covering Georgia Tech here in the crowded booth. Obviously, you know me from the 24/7 Sports Beat, covering Georgia Tech, and we appreciate what you have going on as well. This game, obviously, we know what happened last year. We don't need to necessarily talk about it. You heard from the other two co-hosts that were on the show last night. If you watched the live college football shows Monday and Wednesday nights, same time, 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central, and they gave their opinions on this game and kind of where it was going. We already got Tech by 50 from my man Montega over there. Look, this game is going to tell us a lot about kind of where the program is under Brent Key. I think it's going to tell us also, really early on, this is a benchmark game. It's a benchmark game for Georgia Tech to measure themselves up against an SEC opponent, measure themselves up again against a team that on paper it has more stars, has more probably NFL talent right now, and is a little bit farther along in their process of what they want to do as well. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this game goes. Make sure you get your comments in. Running the show solo tonight. Before we kind of kick it off and get started, though, I wanted to mention Ralph Leary not in the background tonight. His dad, fantastic supporter of the show. His dad had knee replacement surgery. Ralph's tending with him, helping out with him. He had that surgery this morning, so prayers up for this is what we call him. We call him Big Ralph, Little Ralph, if you can believe that. Big Ralph there's having surgery. We get Doug Barlow's comment in here. Just a reminder, Brent Key led the team. A Brent Key-led team took down two ranked opponents in their territory last year. Most definitely. Let's get into this game. We're going to give our keys. And, Matt, you're exactly right. Make sure to smash that like button. Our keys to what Georgia Tech has to do if they want to indeed win this football game. Look, I think that we can first off say this is a more winnable football game than what we saw last year. You may say, a better equipped team. You might have, I think also can say, a little bit more diversity on the offensive side of the football to where I feel a little bit more comfortable saying that this team has a little bit better shot. We'll kind of see where they go with it as well. We had to change the banner as well. See, Ralph wasn't here to do all these things, but I appreciate him. Let's talk about it. The first key to potential victory for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and it's something that I think is concerning not only just in this game, but so far 2 games into this season. Georgia Tech's front seven has to step up. And you say, well, Bryce, what does that mean? There really hasn't been a lick of pass rush so far from Georgia Tech. No sacks, just 4 tackles for loss in the first 2 games. After the Louisville game, for me, I wasn't as necessarily concerned about this, but then you played South Carolina State, who does run the option a lot, didn't really drop back and pass the ball as much. But in this, you face a team in Ole Miss that is 4th in the nation and is the most efficient passing offense so far in the SEC this season. Just 2 games in, they played my beloved Mercer Bears, but they also knocked off a Tulane team that is well respected, I think, as one of the top premier Group of 5 programs in the country. All of this saying, your front seven has to be better. Now, look, the loss of Sylvain Yanjuin hurts this team. Eddie Kelly, that's going to be very, kind of tough to see what you can have around him. Kevin Harris has got to be a guy that really emerges, and you have to get home. You can force quarterback hurries, you can force pressure, but look, Jackson Dart is a guy that, Ole Miss fans and the Rebel fan base is hoping that continues to take a step in the right direction for their sake. But this is a game where I think, coming in, and we'll talk about this throughout the show, coming in offensively that you're better than what you were last year, that you can go into this and say, look, they do a lot of things offensively. We can do things offensively. You don't really want to get into a shootout with them. That's just my personal opinion. You might think differently. Let us know in the comments. But the front seven has to step up. You have to have guys that are, maybe move Dart into situations that make him a little more uncomfortable. He is mobile, but you got to get after the quarterback while still containing that. That's going to have to maybe be something that I think is going to happen. You have to have guys. They're not really getting behind the line very well. In the and I didn't get a haircut. I'm sorry. Just I got complete. Didn't get a haircut. I just combed it differently today, but I appreciate it. I think you got to get creative in the but appreciate the comment there, McKenzie. I don't think that you necessarily have to get crazy with your blitz packages, but you go back to games where Georgia Tech was maybe outmatched, had to get more creative. I think North Carolina the past 2 seasons. I think Pitt, that game up on the road that someone mentioned earlier, him going on the road. What I do believe in this sense is that you're going to have to see Andrew Thacker. This is a game where, Thacker, can you make your money with guys that you got some banged up guys? You have maybe not your A team out there, but you got to get creative. You got to create pressure. I think that we need to see a little more something out of the linebackers kind of in the blitzing concepts. Like last season, in the past couple of seasons, you've had a guy in Charlie Thomas that, was really, really good at being that spiral and getting after the quarterback. Trinius Tatum, a great football player. We just haven't seen the production quite yet, just through 2 weeks of him being kind of that bona fide starter. Braylon Oliver, how does he kind of fit into the mix of these things? So the front seven as a whole, I think that, yes, the run defense has got to be better, but you've got to force Jackson Dart into some uncomfortable situations there behind the line of scrimmage, force him into some bad decisions. I think also you've just got to let him know early on in the game, and I know there's people that appreciate this comment, the game of football is one of those things where if you set the tone early, it could really get into a quarterback's head. Now, look, Dart's going to be playing at home. He's going to have the home crowd on his side. He's going to have the familiarity of sleeping in his own bed the night before. There's not a lot of things that are going to feel uncomfortable to him naturally. If you're Georgia Tech, I think you got to come into this game and you have to create those things, artificially create those. And one of those is getting an early hit. You got to get an early hit on this guy to really set the tone, whether it's, I almost mentioned a name that's not on the roster anymore, because we're going to talk about that later. But whether it's a Kyle Kennard, a Kevin Harris, a guy that can come off the edge, or a guy that come up the interior, and Trinius Tatum, and even if it isn't getting home for a sack, but you force him to throw the ball out of the bounds and you get a good lick on him, I think that that's one of those things where you have to be able to do that. Now, the problem in this is that Ole Miss has got a pretty balanced attack. Look, they've got a great running back, Quinshon Judkins, who hasn't been, I think, necessarily what we thought to begin the season, but this is still one of the more uber talented and probably one of the best running backs in the country. I mean, this is just what he does. So I think Tech's front seven has to step up as a whole. They've got to be able to play gap sound, assignment sound football up front, while also having an aggressive, controlled aggression. You can't get out of your lanes. You can't get away from your assignments. You got to be able to do some of the right things to be able to kind of make the life uncomfortable in that backfield for Ole Miss. Getting to that second topic, and it kind of goes into kind of what we're talking about with that front seven, it's the turnover battle. Look, this is a team last year that, in Georgia Tech, benefited in those games that you mentioned on the road, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, to be able to force a team to play an ugly style of football. It's not the prettiest thing. It's not something that you love to see on tape, but what was it? It was a win. And so I think for this, season so far, Georgia Tech's -1, in the turnover margin category. Were they too dependent on last season? Maybe. They were able to get by, in those final 8 games against Brent Key, 2 of those being key wins where you won that turnover battle. In North Carolina and Pitt. But altogether in this, I think that you have a great opportunity and a great chance to really go on the road and impose your will as a defense. So if that front seven steps up, it alleviates some pressure on the back end to be able to, as a secondary, you can really try to I think that what you can really try to do is take advantage of an Ole Miss offense that had some real lulls offensively last week against Tulane. Tulane couldn't quite take advantage of that in the second half. If Georgia Tech can, if you can force a turnover, you can turn a pick into 7 points or 3 points. It starts to get the momentum and the juices flowing in your direction on the road. Now, once again, we talked about Ole Miss is not going to be uncomfortable playing at home. A good home crowd I expect there to be at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. From what I can tell, there's going to be a decent crowd of Georgia Tech fans making the trip from Atlanta or wherever they may be residing over there into Mississippi. All things said, though, you have to create some turnovers. Be looking at some of these guys on the back end to maybe be more aggressive in the routes. Because, look, you're going to have guys that Ole Miss has weapons. How do you match up with them? They've got good weapons. I think Tech has the players and some of the guys that they need. But what does it look like now? You played against Louisville where you did a great job of that in the first half. You didn't play a full 60. So you have to play a full 60 as a defense here to go beat. It's going to take an A-plus effort, in my opinion, to be able to do that. I really, really like the first half, if you go back and watch of what Louisville did. And people say, well, it's a great first half. It's a great first half. It's one of the better first halves we've seen this team play defensively in quite some time. So can you turn that into a full 60 minutes on the road in what should be, like we said, a hostile environment? You got to force turnovers. You got to create chaos. It's something that is once you kind of start to create that chaos, you start to feel in control in an unfamiliar environment on the road where now the crowd's not as loud. Now Jackson Dart doesn't feel as comfortable. I think that truly what we're going to see here is a game where you're going to have to take some chances, getting creative, and having the ability to say, look, if we got to take a chance here because we got to make a statement. And I want to see Tech play aggressive in this game. I want to see defensively you open it up a little bit more. I'm excited to see what Andrew Thacker can do creatively here in week 3 to be able with an opponent that if you give them time, they'll pick you apart. Like I think we can all say that if Tech does not get pressure and win this turnover battle, it's really hard for me to find a way that they would win this football game. Like I obviously have, a little bit more faith than the other two guys that we had on the show and Will and Ralph in this, because I do think there's a path to win this football game. You're walking a fine line, and you're walking a line that you've got to play with a B plus or higher, rating. I would say an A to A plus game to be able to win this game. And so, we'll kind of see what rolls with that as well. Let's get to the third and final topic here before we get to the predictions, the run game. Offensively, we haven't mentioned a ton. And I have. This team offensively is so far and above and beyond where they were last season. Haynes King in this offense, I think, they're going to throw some haymakers. And I said that on last night's live show. I think that, when you look at that over-under, which I think was around 63, 62 and a half, I don't think it's out of the question for you to be able to hit that over. I think Georgia Tech's going to be able to score some points. I mean, look, this is an Ole Miss defense, and I got this, I got this stat right here. It kind of feels like Georgia Tech is building an offense that's going to be built. That's almost weird saying that, but building an offense that's more capable of getting into a firefight with somebody than kind of the grudge match that we saw, a sloppy grudge match that we saw last year, late in the season. So I think that offensively, I feel good about where King in the passing game. Now, listen, don't get me wrong. Chase Lane not being in this game is going to hurt. The chemistry between him and King is something that was you just can't create that. You can't create the bond that those two guys had in College Station and bring it over here. But look, I mean, they got some weapons, and I'll say it. We'll toot the show's horn here. I felt really good about this wide receiver room. I felt like there were a lot of names that could step up. I think Eric Singleton Jr. is going to have a great chance to be able to kind of do something pretty special in this game. And so when you talk about the run game, you say, well, you're talking a lot about the passing game. The run game has to be established, because if not, as a defense, Pete Golding is just going to be able to drop 8 back and say, you know what? We know they can't run the ball. Now we're going to make them. They can't throw the ball now either. Too. That was really confusing how I said that. They can't run the ball, and so now we're going to drop 8 and force them to throw the ball. And now that creates a situation where the worries of Haynes King, the worries and the mental fortitude to be able to, read coverages. That's a really hard thing for any quarterback to do at any level. When you don't have a run game, The big knock on Haynes King was that he throws the ball into coverage and he throws, too many interceptions. And yes, word are hard. You're exactly right there, GT Bill Hunter. I think that you could see shades of the Haynes King that A&M fans were frustrated with if Georgia Tech can't establish the run game. Now, it's not saying that Haynes King shouldn't be responsible for if he makes a bad throw or anything. What it is saying, though, is that you got to get like guys like Cooley involved early on, whether it's in the pass game. You got to establish that. And look, I mean, I'll say this, I know Tech fans feel a certain type of way about it. To me, you got to keep Jared Ivey, intact. I mean, this is a guy that to me has kind of blossomed as a pass rusher, as an all-around edge guy, an all-around defensive lineman since he left Atlanta. But you've got to keep these guys kind of, in check. How can you do that? You got to have balance. So they can't just pin their ears back and go get you. So the run game has to be established in this. You have to have guys like Cooley. You're going to have to sprinkle in Dante Smith. I mentioned it on Sunday Night Show. I don't know if Dante Smith is your lead back per se. I think the hot hands are obviously, what you've seen out of Travion Cooley and Jamal Haynes. But a 3 running back tandem of those guys, different skill sets. I think Cooley has the home run speed. Haynes has that as well. But, I think that it's going to be something where if you sprinkle in Dante Smith enough, you're starting to see a running back room that has 3 viable options and an offensive line that plays a little bit better, by the way, because you've had 3 options for the past couple of years. Just hasn't worked out. Nightmares, flashbacks to the Jordan Mason, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Dante Smith, regimes. I just think that Dante Smith could play a pivotal role in this game. And I saw a comment earlier, and Rec Talk, appreciate you tuning in, brother. Versus QB ran a 70-yard touchdown. This Ole Miss defense, Haynes is going to do work on Saturday. Yeah, it was the only touchdown scored. My man Carter Peavy down there in Macon, 70-yard touchdown run right up the middle on a design quarterback draw. Could we see more of that? This is a game where, for me, I don't mind the screen passes. I think the passing game is going to have to play a pivotal role. I personally need, just for my viewing purposes and all these things, I need to see what can Busner Faulkner do, be creative against an opponent that's really better than you. Because I think now, this is how I viewed it. I thought Louisville was better than Georgia Tech leaving that game. I feel like they were pretty even. Georgia Tech kind of, beat themselves a little bit in that second half. This is an opponent that I think truly is on paper, and this is why you play the games, truly on paper, just better than you. So now, how do you take this and you move away from the fact of, okay, they're better than you. That means we got to get creative. The same thing I said on the defensive side of the football, I'm saying now on the offensive side. The run game has to be established, whether that's zone runs to the outside, whether it's, pounding the ball in the interior, whether it's, getting Jamal Haynes out in space where I think it doesn't matter who it is, it's going to be hard for these guys to tackle you. So I really like where Tech's kind of moving in the sense of where their offensive identity. I mentioned that after the Louisville game. I feel like they have one. They know what they want to do. It's just a matter of executing it, and you can't make a lot of mistakes, and it kind of goes back to that turnover battle. King's been really good. 7 touchdowns to 1 interception. The 1 interception that he did have, in my opinion, was not really all on him. I feel like he's been making good decisions, but the run game has to be established. So I think it's something where we can kind of see, this team has to kind of take that next step. We get into the final predictions portion of tonight's show. And I'm going to take a sip here. Not a sponsor, but we'll throw it out there, Chick-fil-A. We'll get to it here. By the way, I had the pimento cheese sandwich, chicken sandwich tonight. 3 of those. That was amazing. Enjoyed it. Loved it. We get to the final predictions. And this is where I think that this game has kind of fluctuated. The line moved down to 18 points. Essentially we're saying Ole Miss is a potential 3 touchdown favorite. And, to the casual fans, look, I'll tell you one thing. Our our viewers, no, we're not casuals. No casual college football fans, no casual Georgia Tech fans on this channel. The casual says, yeah, I mean, Ole Miss, Georgia Tech's been awful. Jordan, Ole Miss is Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin. And I want to preface my prediction with saying this. I think that Lane Kiffin is a great offensive coach, offensive mastermind. I think he's one of the better, when it comes to scheming guys open. I think that, he's a guy that can do some really, really good things in an offense and get his weapons and get his guys in the best position to be successful. I also really like Andrew Thacker. I think that Andrew Thacker is a guy that when the time comes for him to, push his chips in, he's done a good job of that. We saw that, over the course of the last 8 games last year. That being said, to me, this one is a game where early on, offensively, I think that Georgia Tech's going to be able to keep up with Ole Miss. I think that the Jackets, the passing game, I've seen enough in the first 2 weeks to say, you know what? Like, I have confidence they can go in there and execute their offense, because in years past, I don't think that you could have said that. We might have tricked ourselves into thinking that, but you couldn't really realistically say this offense can go in and they can execute their game plan against another team. I think that Georgia Tech can do that. Like I said, Ole Miss offensively has lulls that I think is going to keep their defense on the field for a little bit longer in that first half, where Georgia Tech, and I saw the comment right there, Hal Road, slowing the game down. I think that it'll be very, very interesting. That being said, I do think that, Tech's going to be able to hit some haymakers. I think Ole Miss will be as well. The questions about Georgia Tech's defense for me, the questions for me just leave a little bit to be desired. Now, I'm taking Tech to cover, but I'm taking Ole Miss to win this game. And Jonesy, you almost had the same one as me right there. Jonesy goes, sadly, Ole Miss 45, Tech 28. Make sure you get your predictions in. The prediction for me in this is, I've got this game going 41-28. I think that it's going to be a close game in the first half, but I think about midway through the third is where you're going to see Ole Miss start to pull away with some better players, some better execution, because the questions for me defensively are something that I struggle with giving Tech the win on the road. Now, we could get into a halftime score of, let's say 24-21 Ole Miss. And if we got to halftime at 24-21 Ole Miss, it would hurt to lose that game 41-28. I kind of see this game playing out like the Ole Miss Tulane game did, because I think Tulane and Georgia Tech right now are very similar in sense of what they have going on now. I think Tulane has a little more experience, probably the better quarterback play with their starter, Michael Pratt, who didn't play that game last week. But I'm going 41-28. That's kind of where I sit in this one. I think Ole Miss wins it. I just think that defensively, Georgia Tech has got to be able to stop the run. That concerns me, big time. If you're not stopping the run, they're going to be able to really, really get balanced against you in that second half. And you start to get to, if you're not getting to the quarterback, if you don't have maybe the depth that you think you do, in that front seven, because I think that this game has the potential to, let's say this, I think the game has the potential to look really nice in the first half. I just think that where you are as a program and building the depth defensively, you've got some nice pieces. I just don't know if you can hang around with a team that is just built. It's built more out than you over the course of 60 minutes. It's a lot of how I think that the game against, in the team in Athens will go this season. Up until this year so far, I thought they would go up against Clemson. We'll have to reevaluate that, obviously. But I do agree with Louis' comment down here. And, I think this game will say a lot about more the defense and the offense. And I just feel comfortable with the offense heading into this game. It's defensively for me where I kind of stop and say, you know what? It's going to be very, very interesting to see where it goes. I love the fact that, there's a lot of confidence. They're wearing the icy whites. It's going to be a lot of fun. I wanted to pull something up here because I think it's going to be very, very interesting. I do like Georgia Tech's offense in this game. I do like, the ability to score. I also think, people talking about the potential of a trap game. And let's talk about that for a second. Yes, this one on paper has all the ideas of looking at a trap game, and I wanted to see Ole Miss's schedule, after this. To finish out the month of September, and I'll be in Oxford at the end of the month, they're going to be playing Alabama and LSU after this. Could they be looking ahead, knowing that it's an SEC West potential berth into Atlanta on the line with a wide open SEC West right now? They could. The emotion, and we all saw it last weekend, the emotion of Brent Key to me is something that is going to allow this team to play up into, a dogfight into that middle of the third quarter. And I think that while this game, no one wants to lose. And I mentioned the score 41-28, and I think that's what, Ole Miss wins this game over Georgia Tech. That being said, I think the emotions that Brent Key coaches with, that can do something to a team that I think is going to help them going forward. It's going to, allow this to be a tough lesson to learn, because Brent Key was not happy in that post-game press conference after the loss to Louisville. He wasn't happy Tuesday when he spoke to the media. This is a guy that is very much wears his emotions on his sleeve, and I think it works for a program like Georgia Tech because he cares so much about it. Can they go get a win here? I don't think it's as impossible as my co-hosts think, but I think that they could do this. You have to play an A-plus game. You got to create havoc. You got to create negative plays, and we've seen Tech do that against North Carolina when no one thought North Carolina was beatable the past 2 years. Against on the road against Pitt for a half against Georgia last season. All that being said, I think this has a chance to be a fun football game to watch. I just think that this is going to be the, older brother against the little brother, and it's going to be a learning lesson for Brent Key as a coach. It's going to be a learning lesson for this entire staff, really kind of in new roles per se. Faulkner hasn't called plays for necessarily a ton of time. Brent Key is just coaching, as the full-time guy, his third game. You learn things. And while you don't love that, I think this, has a chance to I think this really has a chance to be a game where you can take things away that make you feel better about the rest of the season. Going into the game against, Bowling Green and Wake Forest, I think that you're taking positives out of a loss. And I know people don't like the term, I don't think people like the term necessarily. It's you take, what is the term? And I can't even think of what it is. People don't like the term, it's a mental victory or whatever it is. You want to be able to win the football game on the field, and that's what matters. And that's what matters to Brent Key. Moral victory. Appreciate you, Jonesy. Words are hard. You want to be able to win the football game. I just think that we're going to have to see this team take its lumps against better competition. And Ole Miss is kind of the team. You're playing a really, really tough schedule. It's kind of where I sit with that. Let's get a couple of the comments here before we get out of here. Pappy 872. I hope defense can force some punts. GT makes them pay with run back, score, field position. This is a part that we really haven't talked a lot about, Pappy, but you're exactly right, is can you play the game of field position early on? So that's going to be something for me. Can you play field position early on as you're, as Georgia Tech is, feeling out Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is, two heavyweights, measuring each other up early on in this football game. It's just kind of where I see that. Arnold Kennedy here, Georgia Tech has improved, but defense is not good, smart enough to beat Ole Miss. Arnold, that's kind of where I said the questions defensively for me make it hard for me to, not a pencil. No one has a pencil. No one has a pencil, but make it hard for me to want to give Tech a win on the road here. Please address Matt's comment. Matt's a fantastic person, but we're not going to address that comment. But hey, listen, I appreciate you. You all do a fantastic job. I think Rec Talk goes live after this, but I'm not sure. But yes, look, we appreciate it. My name is Bryce Koon. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're going to have a show Sunday night reacting to the win or the loss for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. It's going to be a lot of fun as well. We'll talk to you next time here on a fantastic episode of The Crowded Booth. How can you support the show? Let's talk about that here for a second. Well, this is the big thing. If If you're interested in advertising your business show, email us at thecrowdedbooth@gmail.com. You can also email us comments, questions, concerns. If you want some great merch, there's links down in the bio here on the YouTube page. You can head over there. We have the In Brent Key We Trust shirts. We have the Bobby Dodd Stadium shirts that are fantastic. And then we also have our Crowded Booth merch as well that you can find over there too. Like this video, subscribe to the channel completely free, set up notifications. Once again, that show schedule for you. This is how it rolls. Sunday nights, 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern. We're talking Georgia Tech. Monday nights, same time. The week recap of college football. No show on Tuesday nights. Wednesday nights, we're back at it with our preview and predictions for the week. And then Thursdays, we'll catch you every here on the channel every single week talking Georgia Tech. We might enter in some new content as well. But make sure you check out the channel as a whole. Appreciate you so much for tuning in. All the live comments. Everyone in the Discord, join the conversation as well. And we will catch you next time here on another episode of The Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.